Hey, what's going on, everybody? Justin here, and in this video I'm going to be doing 5 more-ish of my favorite history books of all time. I figured since the History Challenge Readathon is coming up in just a week or two, if you don't know what that is, definitely check out my announcement video and my other co-host videos as well. I'll leave their links down below for that. It's a really cool history-based non-fiction readathon that takes place from this year. Is going to be August 16th through the end of the month on the 31st. Really a lot of fun. Everyone had a great time last year. If you enjoy history, definitely check it out. I'll leave a link down below and the card thing up there or whatever. But yeah, I did this video last year and it was a really big hit on my channel. So I'm like, I have a lot of history books, I guess, that I would like consider favorites or like really big hits and stuff, like kind of like looking back on things and whatnot. So I found 5 more-ish, I guess, of my favorite history books. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right to them. I'll leave a link to my first video on that down below. I think it was like 6 or 7-ish books or something, but definitely check that one out as well if you're into history and whatever, because it's going to have different things that aren't on this one. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. I totally rambled on in the first video. I think it was like 18 minutes for like 6 books, so we'll try to keep it a little bit shorter this time. But we're going to go ahead and go in I guess the most recent time period to the oldest in history. So let's go ahead and get started. The first one doesn't even really have a time period, I guess. It's Prisoners of Geography, 10 Maps That Explain Everything About the World by Tim Marshall. And this is actually part of like a quadrology now of books. I think the second book is on flags, then a third one on walls, and then I think a last book that's kind of similar. I think it's called The Power of Geography. So I'm not really sure how it's different from this one. But yeah, if you want to see a more in-depth review, you can see a baby Trump reads video on it. It's like one of my first review videos from like years ago. I'll leave a link to that somewhere. But yeah, check it out if you want a good laugh, because I watched it and I was like, oh my gosh, people actually like watched that. And I think it's like actually one of my more well received, I guess, viewed individual kind of book review videos. But be as it may, just real briefly, Tim Marshall kind of picks 10 maps, 10 regions of the world, kind of describes why countries or areas of the world kind of behave the way they do, and why historically they kind of do similar things, over the past like several hundred years, why they act the way they do. For example, he does do a lot of recent, I can't remember exactly what year this one was published. I'll go check real fast. 2015. And he includes a lot of recent events, obviously up to 2015. But for example, the big one, Russia, I think it was the first chapter, and the Crimean invasion, the takeover of Crimea from Ukraine and from Russia, was kind of the big thing at the time. As my cat just destroys everything, apparently. I won't do the plug for the Etsy shop just yet. If I can get it to like stand up there. Of course I won't be able to now. There we go. Anyways, apologies for that. Sophia just, likes to jump in like every video now. What was I saying? Oh yeah, Russia invading the Crimea. That is explained in the book on why like Russia always needs sort of a deep water port, because a lot of their ports, obviously in the north, are frozen most of the year and stuff like that. But I think he deals with Europe, why Europe's so kind of divided with like lots of little countries, why China kind of behaves the way it does, the Middle East, all kinds of stuff. Just thought it was really well done. The arguments are very persuasive, I actually probably should do a reread of this one and then read like the other 3 books in the quadrology. If you're into like geopolitics, this is definitely the book to get for sure. All right, next up we have The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. And this is the winner of the Pulitzer Prize, I think from 1979 or 1980, if I remember correctly. And this is actually part of a trilogy of biographies on Theodore Roosevelt. I read the second one, which is Theodore Rex, which deals entirely with his presidential period. This deals from his birth all the way up to when he becomes president. And there is definitely a reason why it won the Pulitzer Prize, for real. I gotta admit, I don't read a ton of biographies. I say that as I think there's 2 more biographies in this one. I guess biographies are can be really well done, or sometimes they're just like super boring and dry. But definitely, this is definitely one of the coolest ones. And I think part of it is because, especially, even when he was president, and I say that, even when he was after president, he did a bunch of like Amazon and African expeditions and explorations and things like that. But before he was president, he did like ranching. He was like a literal naturalist. Like he learned like bird songs and he literally created a museum when he was basically a kid and was able to donate it to like a New York museum and everything. Just really cool stuff like that. It's kind of weird seeing like just how industrious he was, just all the different like fields he would get into. He wasn't very good with like money management, I guess, but fortunately he was kind of like more into like a family of means and stuff. But yeah, just kind of crazy, like I said, kind of doing stuff out west, you know, the whole like ranching exploration type thing. He was, you know, obviously he was governor of New York at one point. You know, it kind of goes into his, obviously into his politics as like, you know, House representative for the state, things like that. And there was, oh, and when he was like the Secretary of the Navy, obviously he's kind of, you know, the Rough Riders incident in Cuba, stuff like that. Kind of just goes, you just learn so much about all the kind of stuff he was doing. You kind of realize, how did this like man sleep and stuff. Kind of like what it's about. But I really enjoyed how it literally, like, there's tons of information just kind of like on his boyhood and stuff. I thought it was really cool kind of reading about his expeditions like to Egypt and things, when he was, I can't remember how old he was, like 8 or 9, 10, something like that. And just kind of like how drawn to like science and being kind of like a natural historian he was, which, you know, with all my like kind of like biology and like life science books behind me, just, you know, I found it really interesting. And like I said, there's 2 more books in the series. Second book, I don't know if it was just because it was a little bit obviously more political when he's president. Wasn't quite as good as this one, but I gotta read the third one, which is Colonel Roosevelt as well. So yeah. All right, and before we get going, I might as well do the plug since I had to bring it up anyways. If you watched so far, definitely give my Etsy shop a look. Like, you know, maybe like the shop, like some items in it. Definitely is the best way to support the channel. And let's just go ahead and go on to the next one. All right, so now we're entering the medieval period. Most of my history reading is actually from like the middle period and older, you know. Probably the classical Greco-Roman period is my favorite, or actually I wouldn't say my favorite, is probably the one I read the most of. But anyways, this is probably one of my favorite medieval books, though I did have a couple in the other video if you want to check those out. And it's The Greatest Knight by Thomas Asbridge, who's actually pretty famous for his books on the Crusades. I think more so than this one. But The Remarkable Life of William Marshall, the power behind 5 English thrones, which is really true. I think if I can, let me see if I can remember, we had Henry II, his son, Henry the Young King, who technically was never actually king. Like, he was like king with his father, which is kind of weird for like English history, but he never was king in his own right. Richard the Lionhearted, obviously King John, and John's son Henry the Third, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's a really cool biography of William Marshall. It kind of deals a lot with social history though of, you know, medieval England during that time, obviously with kind of like the hugely Norman influence with the House of Anjou and stuff, kind of going on, you know, during that time period in the turn of the 1100s and stuff. Obviously you're dealing with other things such as like kind of like divergencies kind of like on Crusades. One that I really remember sticking out to me was kind of like the whole tournament scene, which I hadn't really read a lot about, but obviously William Marshall and especially Henry the Young King were like just avid fans of like going to tournaments and everything, and kind of dealt a lot with, you know, all that kind of went with that. But it was really cool just like reading about William Marshall, who's like, you know, known as like kind of like, you know, the epitome of like the chivalrous knight, or like, you know, the finest knight, you know, that Europe produced, maybe at least in England. But anyways, I had a really good time reading it. I don't remember if I had an individual review for this one or not. If I do, I'll leave it up there. Actually, and then the Theodore Roosevelt one, I know I did. I'll leave that one up there too. But yeah, I can't remember if I want to say I did. I did a lot more reviews back in the day, so they're all old. And like I said, if you want to go live, go ahead and watch those and leave a comment on those, just saying it came from this video or whatever. All right, the next one is actually an audiobook, and it's not really a book per se, but it's from The Great Courses from the Teaching Company, and it's Late Antiquity by Thomas Noble. And Late Antiquity, if you don't know what that is, it's sort of the period from about 300-ish to like kind of the beginning of the later period of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire anyways, down to about, you know, around Charlemagne, around 800 or so, with kind of the early Middle Ages starting to kind of take form. And this is sort of that weird, goofy transitional period between, you know, ancient Rome, the classical era, to the medieval era. And Late Antiquity is probably my favorite time period in all of history that I like reading about. Just so much stuff is changing, but it's, you know, the Dark Ages, but not really the Dark Ages. But I don't know, I have a lot of fun. I love kind of like the whole, I don't know, the barbarian, the, you know, quote unquote barbarian kind of mythos. Like I said, just kind of this transition period where, you know, you go from like a giant empire to like all these like little factions and stuff in little kingdoms. I don't know, I just really enjoy it. Just a lot of stuff sort of happening and going on. But anyways, this is a 36 lecture course, if I remember correctly. And I remember enjoying it so much that I listened to it twice. I remember like listening to it once at work, like when it first came, maybe not when it first came out, but a long time ago. Then I did a re-listen like after I started BookTube and stuff. I don't know, I think it's like the best thing I've read or listened to or whatever on late antiquity. Though I do have to read Peter Brown's The World of Late Antiquity, which is like literally the book that started the whole field of late antiquity and kind of coined the term and whatnot. But Thomas Noble just does a really good job breaking everything down into like the different time periods, kind of going over the background of Diocletian, who was the emperor that kind of ended the crisis of the 3rd century and started the Dominate, which is sort of like the period of the later end of the Roman Empire, where it was a little bit more, at least in terms of, the emperor and stuff, was a little more authoritarian and stuff, but it kind of had to be to kind of fix a lot of problems stuff. He kind of created the Tetrarchy, which, didn't last and whatever. But down to like, the fall of the West and then kind of all the different like, barbarian tribes that was kind of going on and the kind of the truth between like all the, the migrations. I love how I've done like about 10,000 air quotes like on this like little part of the video. But the barbarian migrations and all the truth and myth to sort of what's going on there. But he also deals quite a bit with like kind of the rise of Islam, during the period of late antiquity, kind of different, and also Byzantium, which doesn't get a lot of love, but is a huge player in late antiquity. It is still technically like the Roman Empire. They view themselves as, I do more air quotes, as Romani is the Romans and stuff. Anyways, if that sounds like a cool time period to you, definitely go ahead and like listen to that or watch the lectures, whatever. Really good stuff. Highly recommend that one. All right, next up is another biography. This is one of my favorites, and it's The Poison King, The Life and Legend of Mithridates, Rome's Deadliest Enemy by Adrian Mayor. Oh man, like Mithridates is like one of my favorite characters from late antiquity. He's the ruler of Pontus, kind of like in what it would be around Anatolia, the Black Sea area, during the classical age, the Roman Republic and whatnot. And he fought Sulla, he fought, oh my gosh, Pompey, who was the guy in the middle? Man, I'm drawing a blank, but I'm going to put his name right here because I feel like I should know, and I'm just drawing a complete blank, but I'm too lazy to like make an edit there and just like go to the computer and find out. But anyways, he fought 3 major Roman generals. He wasn't, the greatest like, tactician or whatever, but every time he was knocked down, he was always able to like politically maneuver himself to rise back up and get like kind of the loyalty of his people. Most of the time, the last time didn't kind of pan out. But anyways, he's got like a whole lot of lore behind him. He's like kind of an ancestor of Cyrus. He's like Cyrus the Great of the Persians. He's also maybe an ancestor of Alexander the Great. He kind of meshes those two kind of worldviews together, and he wants to be kind of like the Eastern counterweight to like kind of the Roman Republic that's dominating everything in the West. But he's got just a bunch of like weird lore behind him. He's got the Mithridatic like elixir and stuff. Like he would ingest venom and stuff and poison, so he'd become like immune to it. And he created a bunch of like other poisons to like take out other people, try to make himself immune to it's just like crazy stuff. It's like kind of going on. But I really think like like HBO or Stars or whatever should like definitely do like a TV show on Mithridates. I don't know, he's just larger than life in a lot of ways. And like I said, I think it's Lucullus. Is that the general that I think I'm trying to like remember? Anyways, he just, like I said, he was sort of like the enemy to Rome. And I always think, if you know Roman history, like what if, one of the big what ifs in my head is always, what if Spartacus, Mithridates, and Quintus Sertorius in Spain had like somehow forged some sort of weird secret alliance at the same time, and just like, took on the Roman Republic in like some sort of concerted effort. But anyways, the book itself, really well done. It's on the top. You don't see many books on like the Roman Republic era from like other viewpoints, if that makes any sense. It's always from like a Roman's perspective or like, just the Roman Republic in general and stuff. So it's really cool actually seeing it from the outside, from an outsider's point of view and an enemy's point of view. So really enjoyed it. Highly recommend that one for sure. And I guess I gotta like find a different way to like show my signs and whatnot. Anyways, the last book here is my favorite book on the Punic Wars, except for the other book in my video. Though that one was on the first Punic War. This one's kind of like on the Punic Wars in general. It's just one of my favorite time periods in history to read about when dealing with Rome. And the Punic Wars, if you don't know what that is the wars between Rome and Carthage. You know, Hannibal crossing the Alps is like a big event from the Second Punic War and whatnot. And Dexter Hoyos, who is the author here, is probably the world's leading Punic War scholar, and he's one of the world's probably leading like Carthaginian scholars. And read another one, Carthage's Other Wars, which is dealing all about Carthage's like conflicts besides the Punic Wars, but though he does obviously just deal with that in this book as well. And I found it was really cool, just a good synthesis of, you know, the first, second, and third Punic Wars, as well as kind of like the interim periods and kind of the politics sort of going on during those time periods. You know, nothing like super fancy per se, but like I said, it's just one of my favorite books on my favorite time period, and that's pretty much all there is to say about that one. The index, I remember, was really good, if I remember, and the footnotes, he's got a kind of a cool blend of footnotes. Why it's not like a giant explanation commentary, but it's more than just the source, as well as kind of like in the middle there. Just really enjoyed it. Like I said, nothing too super fancy or anything, but just my favorite book on my favorite time period, and that's why it's on this list. So let me know what you thought of any of these books, if any of them interest you, and let me know what your favorite book is on history. I'll probably do another video on like my nature books and whatnot, stuff like that, but I'm always on the lookout for really good books. And if you made it this far into the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of cool stuff. Definitely check out the Instagram, the Twitter, the Etsy shop if you want to support the channel. And always remember, whether reading history or not, read victoriously.